these are the 50 worst things that could happen to our industry based on the current boogeyman in the closet for all of the CEOs in the industry, right? We gathered everybody's boogeyman and put them on a list.
How many ended up being right?
Oh my goodness. It's hard to say because things move and they come to some degree.
Sure.
But I would say somewhere between 80 to 95%.
Oh, I almost did
Yep,
that.
that's the right word. That's what
I'm trying to be really good because Keith and I, he's like, you gotta stop that. I'm like, okay, so
do you, Dwiggy?
You talk about it privately, we talk about it publicly. This is the Real Estate Insiders Unfiltered podcast. The Real Estate Insiders Unfiltered podcast. I'm your host, James Dwiggins, along with my co-host, Mr. Keith Robinson.
Yes, sir.
Tell us about this absolutely amazing guest that we had the privilege of having on the pod, Mr. Stefan Swanepoel, the founder and executive chairman of T360 and Real Estate News.
It was, there's real power that you learn from someone with a 40 plus year experience in the residential real estate industry. Stefan talked about the skill of starting over and rebooting his career, which was amazing. He talked about a book that James has actually read, which was
fact
amazing. And I haven't, right?
Yeah,
which is absolutely crazy.
Yeah,
he talked about what the industry's been through over the decade and what he's learned in observing that, the importance of leadership. He went in on what he would do if he ran NAR and the Danger Report, which has gotten a lot of headlines lately. And then what I'm really excited about is his upcoming opportunity report to help us in the industry see areas that we could use to make our businesses better. And then probably most importantly, we had someone on the podcast who called James Dwiggy for 45 minutes, which I'm a fan of. It was great. You're going to love it.
It was a really good show. Tune in, everyone.
Put it in your ears. Stefan,
welcome to the podcast. Keith and I are super excited to have you here today. We were talking about how it's a very quiet time. There's nothing happening in residential real estate, and who better than to have a person who's been in it for a long time, who's seen it from so many different perspectives on the show, to help give us some perspective. Because sometimes it feels like we wake up and I'm just like, oh my God, it's another day of mayhem in the industry. But we are excited to have you here to talk about a lot of subjects, a lot of different things that you've seen and what's happening. I would love for you to start everybody knows who you are, but I'd love for you to share just a little bit about your background, how you built this amazing company, how you become a major force in the industry, and just share a little bit about that. So everybody's got a little historical perspective, and then we'll do a couple rapid fires and then dive into all the heavy questions we've got. So we'll start with that.
Well, first let me say hi, Dwiggy, hi, James. Hi.
Wait, hold on.
Yeah. He did say that, by the way. Yeah.
Yeah. Oh,
yeah, he
boy.
did.
Yeah, that's going to stick.
That tells you that we know each other. So there's that.
Yeah. Well, when you get to know somebody for 2 decades, you can get to say anything you want.
That's
Absolutely.
True. That's true. That is true.
Yeah. Well, thank you for the invite. Thank you for what you guys do for the industry. Thanks for the podcast. They're great. Disappointed that you had to get me during what you would call a quiet time, which means, all the busy people probably were occupied, but at least something's happening on the political scene, right? We have so many things happening in the political world. So real estate's quiet, but the rest of America, super busy.
Yeah, that is true. We had the chief advocacy officer on from NAR the day after the announcement of Biden. We were like, been slow news day for you? And she's just like, oh my God, like my phone has been nonstop. So
well, you could have the president, the incoming president, the outgoing president, the assumptive president, and you could be busy for a whole month just doing different people all the time.
Yeah,
that is true.
Potential presidents. Yeah,
that is true.
Lots of them. You wanted me to do
just a little bit about you've been in this for so long, you've seen this for so long, you have a really very successful company that consults with almost all the top brokerages and franchisors and tech companies in real estate. So I thought we'd just start with a little bit about how you got into that, how you created it, sort of what you've seen, and then we'll move into a lot of the more relevant questions to today. So.
Sure. It's always hard to say where to start because, yes, it has been a fairly full life. I'm very, very grateful for what I've been able to participate and be part of. Let's skip the immigrating part, because I immigrated to this country at the age of 35 after having built a very, very large and successful real estate career in another country. And in that country, I owned the national MLS, the largest franchise, the largest magazine. I was president of NAR for that country, owned a training academy, and owned a consulting company. So with that as my back pocket at the age of 34, I wanted to come to what I deem to be the most awesome country in the world. So I really, 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 really admire America. So I left what I would have called home at the time about 30 years ago, because I'm now in my mid-60s. So I left 30 years ago to come to the United States to basically start over and see if I could do it again. Yeah. This time just in a bigger pond, bigger people, cooler people, bigger countries, bigger companies, bigger market, bigger turnover. Because I felt that what I had achieved in another country, although amazing, and I had been Businessman of the Year there, it was, compared to the United States, relatively small. So came here, started as a VP for a global franchise. 2 years later, ended up being their global worldwide president for that global franchise with 2,500 offices. After a year, decided to leave that and start the company which you referred to today as T360. So T360 is now approximately 25, 26 years old. And in that time, set as a goal to create, to be involved with significantly all associations, all MLSs, all tech companies, all brokers, all franchises on any significant major project of the industry. So we've consulted probably for 700, 800 of the companies in the industry. Everybody, just about, if you looked at the top 100 brokerage companies or franchises or MLSs or associations, they probably all have been or still are our clients, and we are honored to serve them. We have in the process created, I believe, the largest management consulting company in the country, dedicated exclusively to our beloved residential real estate industry space. Yeah. We also have an executive recruiting company. We have a data company. We have an M&A company. We have a tech company. We have a publishing company. We have an events planning company, and we also have a daily newspaper. So we have tried to fill out the service offering by making sure that if we were to take anybody on as a client, that we could offer any management group a full rounded management service. We don't sell real estate. We don't own real estate. We don't buy real estate. We're not licensed agents or brokers. We don't have a franchise or a brand. We are a B2B company. We are here to serve the industry, not the consumer and not the agent and not the transaction. Purely the people that work and live in our space, those are the ones we work for.
So Keith and I were both smiling as you were talking, because I'm going to go back. I'm going to rewind about 4 minutes there, because we were both going, okay, 34, you've done all these things and you're like, okay, I want to do it in a bigger pond. I'm going, all right, overachiever. Wow. So, and then you obviously did it again. Congrats on the success, obviously, here in the United States. And, just to vouch for that, your group and the people you work with are really amazing. I mean, you guys are an absolutely top-notch firm. We've done business with you as well and continue to. So Keith, you've always usually got a question. So why don't I come to you and start there?
You did sort of allude to it. To me, it's such an interesting, most people, if they spent their early phase of their career building something of significance, wouldn't want to start all over, right? Talk a little bit about that, because I'm sure someone listening, right, has got some great idea or something that they wanted to do. How did you push through the fear or the resistance, right? That's
by the way, starting over in an entirely new country where you don't even know anyone.
Similar, same industry, but take us through that thought process, because to me, that's amazing.
I think that the starting over would have maybe not been as forcefully driven if the place where I was, the country where I was a somewhat second, third world country, was going through tumultuous times. Our company had been robbed. I had senior staff members that had been shot at. They had broken into my neighbor's house. Kids at my kids' school had been kidnapped and ransom paid and never found. So when violence and security and safety gets that close, even if that time I had about 125 offices myself, which we had, and we did own, as I said, we owned a franchise, a brokerage company, a technology company, an education company, and a publication. So very much somewhat what we have now. I did not feel that there was a sustainable future for that long term. And although everything was truly at that time comfortable, it was under a current regime in that country where we felt it was okay, but I just didn't see legs on it. I couldn't see 5, 10, 15 years in the future. And when you look at the safety that it could potentially impact the kids and the family, you're saying to yourself, at 35, I can probably do it again. You know, you haven't given another runway to do this. Yeah. Where if you waited till you were, 50 or 60, then the runway becomes shorter and shorter. And you're saying to yourself, I might not get there. At 35, I felt I could get there again.
Yeah. Well, it's also a good reminder. I was smiling until you said some of that stuff. And then I realized how fortunate we are here in the United States to, despite all of our issues, which we're all obviously watching that live on the news all the time. It still is the greatest opportunity in country for starting something new.
No question. Yeah. Not only are you guys blessed, but I am blessed to be able to be here because I've lived actually on let's see, 1, 2, 3 continents and 4 countries. And if I say lived, I don't mean a week or two, I mean 5 years or longer at a time, right? So I've lived on multiple places, and the first, English is my third language. I speak 2 other languages first, which I today don't even consider my home language. I don't consider English my home language either. So I've been enough places where, yes, James, you are correct. This is, with all of its faults and all of its struggles and all of its political challenges for who's going to become the next president, you guys have the greatest country on the planet.
Yeah.
On the planet.
It's a good reminder for that. Well, this is actually a good segue to a couple rapid fires, just real quick about you, and then we'll really get into the meat of it. Keith, why don't you kick us off?
Sure.
So,
since I'm an avid reader and podcast consumer, favorite book or podcast this year, lately, ever, doesn't really matter. And why? Maybe more importantly, why? Like, what are you getting from that book or podcast?
We take, by the way, just for context, any book that's recommended goes on the website for everybody to go see all the recommendations by the guests. So that's what
you just snuck in there. A little one word which you said this year, right? So recently, we were talking about politics, and I'm staying away from politics because I don't like politics at all. But I would probably have to say, due to the current climate, Hillbilly Elegy.
JD Vance.
Just because I had never heard of the person or the book at all prior to, let's call it this month. I had no knowledge that the book even existed. And he himself, being only in his late 30s now and having written the book at, I believe it was about 31 or so, I thought, wow, now I've written a book. As a matter of fact, I've written 55, 56 books. So having somebody who's written a book, I thought, wow, he wrote it. It was allegedly a New York Times bestseller. They made a movie out of it. He has fairly well-known producers and directors which directed the movie. I thought, no, I got to see what the fuss is about. So I wanted to understand what the story was about, who the person was. And although I have to take some of it with a grain of salt, the book is a clear indication of somebody who grew up the wrong side of the tracks. As he says in the book, he had achieved nothing in greatness. That's his own words. By the time he wrote the book, he said, I've done nothing with my life, and I'm a stubborn, stupid, idiot Scottish Irishman. But clearly he was determined, he was driven, he was motivated. He, with the help, of course, of his grandmother, got out of his hillbilly Appalachian, Kentucky, Ohio background, and look where he is today. If ever there is a story of the American dream, he's a great example. Whether that was manipulated, encouraged, fluke, luck, drive, initiative, focus, talent, all of the above.
Probably all of the above.
Yeah, but that's how. But like everybody has a little bit of all of that.
Luck is involved in all of that. Luck is a factor to success.
Hey, Keith,
for sure.
Guess what?
What?
I've read that book.
Stop. You've read a book that I haven't read?
Yeah.
That's wild.
This is important, Stefan. Just hold on a sec. We're having a moment.
This is meaningful.
I've actually read the book. Yeah.
That's insane. Not only have you read a book, you've read a book that I haven't read.
It's the only book I've read. Stefan's written 55 books. I've read one. So like let's not forget that for a second.
Well, I haven't ordered, so we'll book club it.
I feel pain in here if you haven't even read my danger report or my trends report.
I'm kidding. I've read your, it's a joke because Keith is a very, very like avid reader. I'm also married to somebody who can read like an entire book in a day and a half. It trips me out. That book, why I read it, is because for my wife, that's a very that book resonates with her and some of her upbringing, and so it's like that's a very important book in her life. It's funny that it was brought up today.
Stay tuned for the James and Keith book club coming soon to
a
city near you.
Second question, then we'll get into all the main ones. If you could have lunch with someone current or historical, who would it be? And then obviously most important reason why.
I don't do single lunches, so I'm going to have to change your lunch appointment and say there's always 3 or 4 seats around the table. So I would not do a single lunch. I would squeeze them, but I will make them very much the same. And it has to be around business. Nope. So I would give you a rapid fire. Let's say 3 or 4. I would say Stephen Jobs because he's a creative genius, Elon Musk because he's a crazy genius, Bill Gates because he's a thoughtful genius, and Jeff Bezos because he's a visionary genius.
It's a good one.
I would put them around the table and I would say there are 4 people that I have never met, but we are all very aware of them. You know, 1 or 2 of them, or one of them is no longer with us, and the other 3 are, but they have changed my world, our world very significantly, and I am enamored by whether they are creative, different, thoughtful, visionary, in some cases just really off the chart crazy. But I would like to see what makes a genius tick, right?
Yeah, totally. That would be a hell of a conversation.
Yeah, we're all going to that lunch.
I was going to say the other question is a follow-up, which would be funny, is whose yacht would you want to do it on? All right, so let's dive in because we've got only so much time with you, and I know you're more eager to get back to that beautiful island you live on. So this is a serious question, and I think it's incredibly relevant to where we are today. But you've seen lots of scandals and turmoil over this period of time, and you know, is it different? Is it safe to say it's different? And then the biggest question is where did we go wrong if it is?
Let's stay away from the word scandals and just say we've seen a lot of turmoil in our industry, because I think that in its own is bad enough. We have had many upheavals in this industry. I actually did my master's degree on the residential real estate, and my thesis was about the last 100 years in our industry. So I have dissected this industry from top to bottom. Yeah. And again, scandals ignored and even personalities ignored. We've had turmoil every time, I think, when people have been self-centered, arrogant, cocky, and have done things for their own benefit more than rather trying to be a contributor to the bigger cause. This is a very, very big industry, and we've had many great leaders. There have been many great people, but we've not had many leaders that have really done things for the entire industry. And we have such a great country, industry, and people. I wish we would have had more leaders in recent time that would have stepped up to take on the flag for the industry as a whole, because we are so fragmented, unfortunately, that we have people running in all directions, sometimes doing stupid things, sometimes doing good things, but of course for themselves, which is acceptable. We all have our own company, our own business, but
do you have any examples that you could give us without specifically naming people or anything, but just like some examples or go ahead, fine, whatever you want to do, but just like what are some examples of where this selfishness has caused an issue, or some of these things that we have led us to where we are today, since you've written about the history of this industry more than any other person I know?
Yes, 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 yes. Well, you're always direct, and I probably appreciate that from you guys the most. So, I like the unfiltered part, but at the same time, one should tread carefully, right? Because you
Yes.
want to go and publish this on air, and we don't want to upset anybody. So, we shouldn't, shoot arrows or point cannons at too many people, which is not nice. But
maybe I'll ask the same question in a different way. Is that sort of, and these are my words, not yours, but that sort of megalomaniac leadership style, right? That's not what you said. That's what I interpreted on what you said. Is that a feature or is that a bug? What I mean by that is that something that is unique to our industry or inherent into our industry? And it's the same as everyone else. So
I don't think it's inherent to our industry, but our industry is most certainly full of them because we are such strong-willed, individual, fragmented, successful salespeople, entrepreneurial people. So we have way more entrepreneurial, creative geniusness in our industry than you might have in a
insurance or
a profession,
right.
Yes, whether it's insurance, or even a profession like maybe lawyers or doctors or
plumbers,
engineers, which are more conditioned to be similar-minded in their thinking. We have people that go in all directions in our industry. I'll give you one example, and I'm going to say it up front with respect to the NAR, which I do like very, very much, and I think that they have done enormously good for the industry over the 110, 15 years they've been in existence. But I feel that, again, one individual should not put their hand up and say, well, I've done a lot. There are many people that have done a lot. But NAR seems to have lost its way. And if anybody needs to step up in this space, I know, James, you are, and you as an individual are, you and your company are, you and this podcast is, and I'd like to believe that we and T3 do the same, and we can probably list another 10 or 20 people. But we need a collective leadership in the industry, and one would have felt in the last 10 or 20 years, it should have been NAR. They were at the right place, the right time. They had the vehicles, they had the budget, they had the trademarks, they had the advocacy, they had the education. And sometimes I feel they've abandoned us, right? And it's like, no, don't do that. You could have done more. And there have been blunders time and time and again where NAR, I think, could have done so much more. And they can still do. I'm not saying they've stopped.
Sure. Yeah.
But they have lost more for us. Now, they've also done more for us. So right. It's granted. But they've lost more than they could have. I want so much more for them because I want so much more for our space.
Yeah. There's so much potential there, right?
Yeah.
There's so much opportunity for, and they either maybe haven't done all that they could and then haven't clearly articulated what they have done, right?
It's hard for somebody at a Zillow or a CoStar or a Realtor.com from a portal point of view to stand up because they're in a heated competition on their own. It's hard for somebody from your company brand or another company brand or another franchise to stand up because people say, oh, but you're doing it for vested interest, right? So how many people truly could stand up and be a leader for the industry where the baggage which comes with them is very, very little or is perceived to be little. And NAR, I believe, had that position in the 80s and the 90s and maybe even the early 2000s. I think they abdicated it in the last 10 years.
Yeah, it does seem like they are, to give them some flowers. My observation is they are wrestling their way back towards that approach, right, from the 80s and the 90s and really trying to lead.
I would agree with you, Keith. I obviously have, had a lot of vocal opinions about NAR, and what I'll give them credit for, both positive and negative, is that I think in the past they would have tried to ignore people that say anything negative, but in fairness to the current leadership, especially over the past 4 or 5 months, they've actually been very outwardly asking for feedback and taking any type of constructive criticism that I or others might throw at them and be like, okay, we'll take that under advisement and work on it. And I've seen some meaningful changes, but Stefan, you are correct. And it's the part of it's people didn't, and to some degree the industry is lazy and hasn't educated itself, in fairness. Like we've got so busy doing real estate that we didn't spend any time trying to figure out what they provide and do. But you're right in that it felt like there's been this missed opportunity. It's CCP is a good example of everyone's like they're going to get investigated again, and CCP is going away. I'm like, no, it's not going to be that CCP is going away. That's actually counter to what the Department of Justice would want. It's the office exclusive part is what they're going to have a problem with, because instead of doing the right thing when we created CCP, a bunch of, to your point kind of earlier, the greed got in the way with brokerages saying, well, we'll actually support it, but we want to be able to keep things in the office and keep it off the MLS, and which basically means double end deals and make more money. So there's a point where you kind of have to stand up for the betterment of the industry, using your words, Stefan, versus just looking out for oneself on that. And I think
when we lose sight, and this is we've entered officially the ranting portion of the podcast, which I'm a fan of. When you lose sight of the human being in the transaction, that's when we start to erode what we do and the power and position that we have in people's lives. Right?
Yeah,
and when you stop focusing on the human being who is buying and selling homes and start focusing on how you can double end a deal or increase your ROI or your top line revenue at the sacrifice of what's best for the human being in the transaction, then that's when we've lost our way.
I think many people want NAR or somebody else, but wants NAR to stand up. We want a leader. We need a leader. We need direction. And although we may be busy as an industry because of COVID or the recession or the boom before that, I understand that. And yes, that is a circumstantial activity that took place, not an excuse. Right?
Yeah.
During all times, somebody's got to be a captain of the ship, right?
Yeah.
Somebody's got to be there when the storms are coming. And yes, the storms do come, and yes, there are good days and bad days. Somebody's got to keep on leading. And many times when my team gives me documents and I review and edit and look, and they get a lot of red paint back on their document, right? And it's all colored up. Jack has now learned that the more red ink I give you, the more I love you. If I did not care for your document, if I did not care for your thought, I would have put one squiggle line right through the entire document or ripped it up or told you to go do it again. If I actually go spend an hour preparing or reading or editing, so NAR should see, like you said, Twiggy, that when I give comments and it comes from a variety of people, meaning myself, we really mean it because we care so much. We really want you to succeed. It's not criticism for criticism. It's criticism because we are scared. We think you're not seeing it.
You're not
doing.
You're not criticizing the person. You're fine tuning the idea, right? And there's a big difference between a thought and a person. Yeah.
So follow up on that, Stefan. So say you are the new CEO of NAR for a minute. Like, where would you focus first? What would you do if you were in charge? I mean, you actually mentioned you were essentially in another country. So like, where would you start with that? Just curious. Let's put you on the spot.
we need to lead, which means you have to have a vision. You have to say what you do what you say, execute on it don't change midstream, stay true, stay pure, have a moral compass, execute it, bring the team along, build a team. We give, in my opinion, too much power to the president of NAR every year and not enough power to the CEO of NAR every year. And what I mean by that is that the president is elected every year. And unfortunately, as great as we may have a great Kevin at the moment in the position, we've had, since COVID, we've had 6 presidents of NAR. 6. They changed too quickly. Now, some left by choice, some were kicked out, some were there for a short period of time. It doesn't mind why they came or go, but even if they stay for their full term, it's 12 months.
Right.
Your company, Dwiggy, took more than 12 months to build. Mine has taken 25 years to build. So you need the continuity of a strong, powerful CEO that is there year in and year out. Yes, a president could have a significant impact, yes, but he or she should not change the direction or at least the perception of direction in the eyes of the members from left to right to left to right. Or I'm going to focus this year on topic 1 and next year on topic 2, right? You need that longer vision, that continuity, that consistency, so that I can, as Keith said, I can relate to the person, I can believe in the person, I can follow the person. As much as you're following NAR, you are following their leaders as well.
Right.
People follow this podcast, not because it's a podcast. Everybody does a podcast. It's because the two of you on the podcast have made podcasting interesting and real and unfiltered, right? So people make it real. Who's the real person at NAR at the moment, right? I mean, list me the 10 most influential people in NAR at the moment that you look up to and that you know will be there next year.
That wasn't a question, was it?
I assume that was rhetorical.
I was hoping that was rhetorical for a minute. Look, your point is totally valid. In fact, but you know, what's ironic is Kevin Sears has an opportunity because he's got 2 years to do what he wants to do.
Yeah.
And, you know, I actually think I'm going to give Kevin massive props because what he's done is jumped in a time he wasn't expecting to. Mm-hmm. And he's had, I mean, God, can you imagine like jumping into that role with what's happening going, this was not on my bingo card, was this.
He has clearly in 6 months been more transparent, more honest, more direct, more forthcoming than a handful of presidents before him were or perceived to be. So, you know, can he maybe after his 2-year presidency, could he take on the role of CEO for the next 4 and give us a nice 6-year continuity here? So let's get the job done.
That's an interesting idea.
Yeah. But he has, I mean, poor guy, man, when he puts out something, you go look in the comments. Woo! Like, I mean, he is out there taking the slings and arrows.
He's taking shots.
Which is part of leadership, though.
Yeah,
right?
totally.
He should switch off those comments because some of those comments are absolutely pointless.
Yes.
There are people in this industry that love him, NAR, the cause, and will do a lot for NAR in time and money and finances and support. I mean, he could put a team together. I could help him, but he could put a team together of like the dream team, like an Olympic team, right? We could put an Olympic team of people together in this industry, which today will almost fall on the sword for NAR.
Yep. Mm-hmm. Yeah, you're right.
They are there.
No, you're right. You're 100% right. I mean, imagine if you got some of the most influential people, yourself and a few others in a room, and like, look, we're not leaving this conference room until we have a very strong vision of where we're going to take this thing. Yeah. Right.
Mm-hmm. And we are pinky swearing, we're committing here that we are going to do this, right? We are going to execute it. If you look at the SP 200, which we put together every year of the 200 most influential and powerful leaders in the industry, of which you've been on it, still on it. If you look at that list, but go back 10 years, I mean, just go back and look at that number of people that actually have retired and they're still in the industry. They don't work anymore, or they're casually working. They're not in a full-time position anymore, but they're still here. You could put a dream team of Michael Jordans together here, which, and I'm not saying that you need them forever. I'm not saying they want the job. I'm saying they would come out of hibernation for 6 months or a year.
Sure.
They would come back on a consulting advisory capacity and say, right, let's pull these, I don't know, brain trust together. Let's fix this.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Because they love the industry, right? They would do it out of love. There's a lot of
people that love the industry.
Out of anything else.
So let me shift this a little bit, just because we're obviously also feeling the weight of. So in my tenure in the industry, which is not nearly as long as yours, obviously, but I come third generation, so I've seen this from my 44 years on the planet and really active for about 23 of those. It feels very different from the DOJ, the FTC, and the political headwinds of where we've been. The administration's current administration's focused on trying to reduce the cost of housing. We've got investigations all over the place. You've got the Consumer Federation of America. I guess the question I'm asking, is this just where the wind's blowing right now because it's the issue that's most front and center in America is the cost of housing? Or is this just an administration thing? Like, you've seen this again for 20 some years. So what's your take on where we are with all of this? Or did we cause this? Maybe that's the other question.
Yeah, I entered real estate 83, so it's now 41 years, 42 years.
Jesus, okay, yeah.
So I'm trying to catch up to your age of 44. What is fascinating?
I was one for perspective, so I don't remember that, by the way.
What is fascinating is that whether it is innovation of new business models, legal attacks, governmental changes, concerns, you used the word scandals and turmoil before, if we bubble those back up, they seem to be, they seem to have always been here. I don't think that we have more now. I think maybe you are just more in tune to them. You are more aware of them. You have a podcast. You're talking to more people. So you are not as focused as you were on your previous brand where you had just started in San Francisco when you were focusing trying to get the office up and running. So we go through stages in our life where we sometimes just care more, do more, get more involved. That would be one reason. Secondly, 20, 30, 40 years ago, 50 years ago, when Dave Liniger started, a national big franchise brand, there weren't that many podcasts. There weren't that many TV shows. There weren't that many. So we know today more about our presidents running and our vice presidents running than we did 40 years ago. And I think the same applies to real estate. We scrutinize things more. We're more critical. We are more outspoken. We have more vehicles to be outspoken to. But yes, there are more. If I look at the trends report, which I've written, which is now in its 18th or 19th year, what makes that report unique is that it is a 220-page snapshot every 12 months of our industry, right? So it goes down, and I only look basically at a 12, 18-month window and chop it off. So when you go back in these editions, and what's terrible about a book is I can't change what I said. So if I said something, it's there forever for everybody to read.
Forever.
But you can go back and look at a 10 or a 12 or a 15-year version of something, and you can see what the thinking was, because those reports, although they are my words, I am not trying to influence the industry. I am trying to, like you, gather opinion from the industry, listen to opinion, listen to wisdom and thoughtfulness, and then regurgitate it back and give it back to the industry in a cleaner, structured table, book, podcast format where people can look or listen to it and say, wow, I gained some knowledge today which I did not have before, and that's going to lead me to a better insight, a better path, a better solution. So if I look back in my books, which I have done from time to time, we've had turmoil. We've had government. We've had DOJ. We've had NAR. This is consistent. Yes, the topic changes, but we have 4 topics. We've sometimes won, most of the times. We have made changes. Sometimes we have adapted. We think we've just got the right position where we are to run the industry, and a new model, a new vendor, a new company, a new technology pops up, and we are screaming blue murder all the way from the beginning again and screaming that this is the worst thing for the industry ever. Then we hate it and we badmouth it for, I don't know, better part of
At least we're consistent.
Yeah.
And then 5 to 10 years later, that product becomes mainstream and we all forget that we hated it and we all start using it or doing it.
And then there's something else.
Yep. And we have repeated that cycle. I can prove to you in a document which I've written, we've repeated that cycle at least 9 times, which I can identify since the turn of the century, previous century.
By the way, just for audience listeners and viewers, we'll put a link into the show notes, but the Trends Report is amazing. We get it every year. My leadership team sits down, we read it, we go through it, because it's both a reminder of things and sort of projecting forward of what you think is going to happen and how to prepare around it. I would encourage everyone to do that. I'm going to segue that because it's a good lead into the Danger Report, the now infamous Danger Report.
More recently, more infamous.
Yeah, and I'll let you set it up, but just, you were commissioned by NER to write this report, ironically. And I remember reading it, by the way, because everybody was talking about it for like 18 months of like, oh my God, we're all going to die. But it's been brought back to light with all the civil cases. So let's talk a little about what you were commissioned to do, and then sort of what happened or didn't happen. And then sort of it's come back up again, unfortunately. So.
Yeah, I don't think it's ironic that NAR commissioned it. I would probably say this is a time to give NAR absolute kudos. The leadership at the time felt, and I think they were accurate, that there was a disproportionately high amount of LobbyCon. If you went to some of the big conventions out there and something would be said from a stage, which we would all yawn. And then as soon as you walk out by the doors, you hear 10 other stories going down the passage, right? And people were scared about technology and new entrants and portholes and clickbait and online transactions and virtual realities and vow websites. I mean, there was a lot of talk and a lot of fear, and the industry almost became paralyzed. And NAR did have and still does have a number of subcommittees which they do look at the future. They have strategic planning committees and big broker advisory committees. So they have these events. And at these events, the same items started, circulating, and people were paralyzed. It's the boogeyman. Yeah. And leadership came to me at some stage and they said, how can we address it? Do you think you could help me create a list of all the boogeymen? Could we create a list of all the threats? And we looked at whether we should write another trends report, and we said, no, there is a trends report, because the Swanepoel Trends Report by that time was already 7 years old. So we said, there's no point in creating another trends report. So we discussed, what document could you create that could help an entire industry? Because it is hard to move 1.5 million realtors or 2.5 million licensees. I mean, or 104,000 companies. How do you move them? So the request from NAR was, can you go take the temperature of the entire industry? Could we identify 40, 50, 60, 70, 80 well-known leaders which have access to data and information, who have their finger on the pulse of the industry? Could you go talk to them, and could we create a summary or a synopsis? They did not call it the danger report at the time. We had no idea what it was going to be called. We didn't even know what it was going to look like. It was a fairly open-ended request from NAR, which I think was incredibly admirable.
Yeah, sure, brave. Yeah.
As I did the interviews, and I did them all individually, privately, one-on-one, I went and actually met everybody at the office. I didn't do anything at a convention, didn't do anything online. So I went and saw all of the big franchise companies, all of the big independent companies, big associations, MLSs at their offices. I wanted to see them on their home turf. And they were given basically 3 questions. And the questions are not hard. They're not complicated. They're open-ended, But to drill it down to one sentence is, what keeps you up at night? And talk to me. And I did not interject. I did not influence. I did not guide. I just talked to me. And I basically listened. And from those enormous amount of information which I gathered, I sat down and I tried to distill it into a document. And it was very, very hard, because the information which you received was all over the board. Some of it was financial, some was legal, some was technology, some was aimed at NAR, some was aimed at associations, some were aimed at MLSs. And I would say about halfway through it, I realized I'm going to have to break this into pieces. I'm going to have to do an agent-focused piece and a broker-focused piece. Otherwise, you can't do an apples and orange mix. And then about 3/4 through, I realized I have too much data. I'm going to have to put them in order, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Otherwise, I'm going to give you so many data points, 50 data points, you're not going to understand how to calibrate them. So we had to go back and we had to go and try and calibrate them into some kind of a weighted order of how many times was this brought up in the discussion, with how much intensity and passion was talked about it, how much data is there to support that given point, and how far in the future do we think that this alleged threat, this alleged danger is going to happen. We categorically stated in the report that this is not the future. This is not a prediction. It is not a trend we're trying to identify. These are 50 black swans. These are the 50 worst things that could happen to our industry based on the current boogeyman in the closet for all of the CEOs in the industry, right? We gathered everybody's boogeyman and put them on a list.
How many ended up being right?
Oh my goodness. It's hard to say, because things move and they come to some degree.
Sure.
But I would say somewhere between 80 to 95%.
Oh, I almost did
yep, that's the right word. That's what I'm
trying to be really good, because Keith and I, he's like, you gotta stop that. I'm like,
do you Dwiggy?
That's a really good. That's a man.
So again, what irks me is not that the report came out. I think it is the most admirable task a nonprofit association could do, is an introspection on yourself or on your space.
Yeah.
Wow. What's disappointing is that in each of those sections, and there's an agent section, broker, NAR, state and local association, MLS section, that the players within each of those sections did not do a lot.
Yeah.
Right.
You mean our industry just kind of puts its head in the sand and doesn't really adapt?
Good observation.
Wow.
Yeah.
I would say that the agents probably did the most, actually.
Well, they have to, right? They have to adapt. Their wallets are impacted if they don't. Like human beings who wake up and have no idea where their next paycheck is going to come from are highly motivated to adapt to current.
It wasn't NIR's task to fix all the things in the industry.
Sure,
it's not their task to fix the MLS. So it's not their task to fix a brokerage company. But there was a section on NAR and there was a section on state and local associations. And those two sections pinpointed the unvarnished truth of their structural problems and their voting problems and their size of their board of director and their lack of leadership and the hindrance of their execution. And I would have hoped from my heart that more associations would have fixed it. Now, some did, but many didn't.
Yeah.
I've got to follow up.
Go.
So you've spent a 40-year career of thinking deeply about the industry, asking open and thoughtful questions, trying to see around corners and identify talent, dangers, and all those things. What do you think the industry looks like over the next 36 months? When you are thinking about the industry in the next 3 years, what do you think about? Maybe not, you could talk about dangers, you could talk about opportunities, but over the next 3 years, when you put your brain and apply it to the industry, what are you thinking? What are you seeing? What are you feeling?
Write this down, Keith, because it's 80 to 90% accuracy when you did it last time.
Yeah, it's also recorded.
Oh, shoot. There goes that word again. What is most consistent in 41 years of research and 55 books and over 200 trends identified, analyzed, and discussed is that they never happen as fast as we think they're going to happen. Mm-hmm. Because when you hear about them the first time, it is the leadership or the far out there ahead of the curve people talking about it. And we must remember that every industry, every race, country, creed, geography has a curve, right? There's a bell curve. So you have to have the majority, the masses catch up to that leadership. So although you see something, you think, oh boy, if this is going to go like lightning fire, it's going to be very short. It usually takes much longer than you anticipate. So that's one. Two, over time, meaning over the 40 years which I've been doing this, the curve is, however, getting shorter. So where it usually took 10 to 15 years, then took a 7 to 10 years, then it took a 3 to 5, we now seem to be closer to a 2, 3, 4 year cycle of actually having things run through the entire industry because of largely the technology base and platform that has been created and allows us to talk to millions of people relatively quickly. So it does happen quicker. 3, do not forget to expect the unexpected. There are always smarter people. There are always new initiatives. There are always new creations. And when you say, well, I think that this company or this product owns the market, they're going to kill it. It is surprising how somebody else comes up with something else that I wouldn't say takes it out. Do I mention brands or no brands on this call?
Whatever you want.
Yeah.
Just
if you go back and say Century 21 in the 70s was the one that basically introduced franchising to real estate and used it as a growth engine in the 70s to become very, very large and actually became the first national company. Everybody thought it couldn't be affected. Remax came along, used the same concept of franchising, but introduced a compensation package which was different, and then basically took over from Century 21 and became the biggest company in the industry. Yep. Then another company came which used franchising and used all compensation packages, but decided to buy multiple brands together and cobble them together, put them under one collective brand and own multiple brands. And Realogy and HFS and Anywhere was born owning multiple brands, and they became the largest in the country. And then another one says, well, I'm going to use compensation and franchising, and I'm going to create team spirit and commission giving back profits. And Keller Williams came and grew away. And then another company came and said, I like all of that. That's what's going to be great. But what if I did it virtually? And EXP came along, right?
Yeah, right.
None of these companies killed their predecessor.
Right.
Century 21, Remax, Realogy, or in their new state, Anywhere, are all still around, and they are all still great, credible, national, meaningful players. But a new company has added, tweaked. Sometimes it's a little small tweak, but they innovate and they bring us something. You could call it right time, right place. it is usually right leader, right place, right? It is one individual that had the vision or the forethought, whether you said that's Dave Liniger, or you say that's Henry Silverman, or you say that's Gary Keller, or you say that's Glenn Kelman, or that's Glenn Sanford. It's an individual that brings that concept to fruition, is willing to take the bullets, runs out against the stream, runs out ahead of the curve, and builds what he or she absolutely unconditionally believes in. And yes, it takes a decade.
Is there, you've seen and met these leaders. You don't have to mention anyone specifically, right? But how is there a through line skill or talent that you see these leaders have that is sort of maybe part of, not the total, but part of the origin story of their success?
Unconditional belief in yourself.
Like relentless, right? Relentless.
Relentless.
Yeah.
Relentless energy, extreme focus, a no prisoners attitude, and a focus towards the end. Do not give up. I am seeing this through to the end.
Yeah. That's a great list. That is a great list.
So I want to ask this question because I know that this is I'm privy to this because you sent it to me and I appreciate it. You've had the danger report, but you're also now you're doing the opportunity report. So can you share with the listeners about what you're working on? And by the way, everybody should be getting this thing.
Yeah, grab that one for sure.
Yeah, this is the one to, if you want to get the danger report and go back in time and grab up your favorite beverage when you read it, but this is the other side of it. So tell us about it.
Yeah, when we created the danger report, the understanding from NAR was that we would not provide solutions. We would not recommend solutions because NAR, and I believe correctly, thought at the time, and I still believe that it was a true statement, it was not NAR's place to intermix into business and entrepreneurs and actually tell people what to do. So because it was an NAR report, it simply just look, the NAR does not have, NAR didn't write the danger report. They didn't say anything. There's nothing in the report which NAR stated. That's not their words. Those are my words out of the interviews from the people.
Right.
So we didn't provide solutions because we didn't ask for solutions. Yet in the last 10 years, as you said, this report keeps on coming back and back and back. And probably today, the danger report's the most widely read report in the industry. It feels like because the people didn't the last time actually do a lot about the dangers, I am feeling a little guilty that maybe we should help the industry more. So the opportunity report is a sincere effort on my side, my company side, but my side. And I am going to again reach out to the top 50, 60, 70 leaders of the industry, people like you, James, but people that run all of the companies which I've already mentioned, and anybody else you can think on the SP200. Anybody that has control over a lot of people, a lot of business, a lot of market share, a lot of data, a lot of information, it has exposed to the industry, that understands the industry on different facets. I am going to ask the same kind of questions, not what keeps you up at night. What do you think are the biggest opportunities that lie ahead, as Keith said, in the next 3 years for this space, both as an agent, a broker, NAR, an association, an MLS? What could we do if we absolutely had a clean slate?
I love it.
I'm going to give them unfiltered to all of you. And again, I will rank them and I'll put them in categories. And it will be simply no strings attached. The intention is this report's not going to be sold. We will not, if I get any input from you, I am not putting any credit against your name. We are trying to keep the report clean. We're trying to keep it neutral so that you look at the contents of the report and not say, oh, well, that comes from so-and-so's company and therefore I'm influenced.
Yeah, I got you. Yeah.
I don't want that influence. I want you to look at the data and say, wow, here are 20, 30, 40, 50 well bespoke, well researched, well analyzed from 50 smart people what they think we could do. And then, damn it, industry, step up and
start
go
doing
do
it.
the stuff. Let's lead again. Let's lead again.
I love it. Yeah. That's a really, first of all, thank you for taking that on because there needs to be some optimism. You know, Keith and I talk about this often, but we're also built from that mindset that we see opportunity in change.
Yep.
And we're actually excited about some of the changes. I'm like, man, there's so much interesting opportunities for organizations that grasp onto it, but also these are really hardworking people. And I think we forget sometimes the industry gets a bad rep, but the consumer doesn't understand how much work agents put in and the amount of time they do, and on weekends, and there's like, oh, I'm going to go be an agent, I'm going to have all this free time. No, right. You just got no time. Like it's a 24/7 job. And I love the fact you're going to provide something that's going to give some people some hope, especially with all the negative drama that's been going on. So one question.
I will promise this report will not be negative. We are not looking at dangers. So there is no boogeyman in this report. This is going to try and look at every not just positive, but every opportunity that may be out there, legit or not legit. You go figure out whether it applies to you or your company or state. But if somebody says this could happen or this could do, the report is to be an agenda for you to make running your life and your business, your company, just a tad easier, just a little bit easier.
I'm excited. When's the ETA? Just so everybody can. What are you thinking?
I will definitely finish it before the end of this year, so it will definitely be out no later than January. I will see, depending on the information and how many people I can interview and what I collect, because it also depends on how much is repetitive, how much is new, how deep do I have to go in a certain. If I don't get enough information in a certain thing, I might pull a few more people into interview to see if I can get the data. Depending on that, it could be anywhere between NAR this year and January next year.
I love it. Well, I'm gonna let Keith ask the last and final question, which we do, and it's a good way to wrap up because I'm feeling opportunistic right now after having this discussion.
I needed this.
But we have a question we always ask at the end. Keith will go ahead and ask it, and you give some advice on this. So,
if you were an agent or brokerage, what's the one thing you'd implement today to help your business?
Get the right attitude. Stop being boring. Don't do the same thing. Outperform your competitor. Be different. Accept change. Don't sit on your hands. It's okay. You can win. The industry has got to blow. We are nowhere near dead. Near dead. This is not the beginning. This is not a new chapter. This is not the end. It is simply just life. There are ups and downs. There are changes. Sometimes you get a bump in the road. So what? Get your attitude fixed up. Get rid of all of this bullshit and this negativity and this pointing finger. Accept responsibility and go forward. You can hit a home run. And if you don't, the people all around you are going to hit it because I'm going to give them the roadmap.
Yeah. Yeah, that's awesome.
That's a great way to end this thing. Stefan, thank you so much for being here. I'm so glad we got to do this with you. I know that everyone will really appreciate hearing your perspective on all of this. And like I said, for viewers, listeners, we'll have some links in the show notes for some of the reports that he was referring to. And as soon as the opportunity report is out, we'd love to have you back to talk about it so that you can share sort of your overview of what it is and everything that's in there. We're excited to hear about that. So
and I'll add, thank you for your commitment to the industry.
Yeah.
You've done it for a very long time and it's meaningful. So thank you for that.
Thank you, Keith. Thank you, James, for the invite. Honored to be here and thank you for your podcast.
Of course. We'll have you back soon.
All righty. Take care. Bye-bye.
All right. It's our job to say out loud what everybody's only thinking to themselves. It's your job to subscribe to this podcast so you never miss an episode.